progress. I'm Dave Cook from the Monitor. Our guest this morning is Nirupama Rao, Ambassador of India to the United States. It's her first visit to our high cholesterol breakfast club. We thank her very much for being with us. The Ambassador joined the Indian Foreign Service 39 years ago after topping the All India Civil Service exam. Since then, she's served her country in a variety of prestigious posts, including Ambassador to Peru and Bolivia, Ambassador to China, and Indian Foreign Secretary. The Ambassador holds bachelor's and master's degrees in English literature and is a published poet, probably only one at the table this morning, I would wager, and was a fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs at Harvard and a distinguished international executive in residence at the University of Maryland. She and her husband are the parents of 2 sons. So much for biography. Now on to the exciting process portion of our program. As always, we're on the record here. Please, no live blogging or tweeting or other means of filing while the breakfast is underway. There's no embargo when the session ends. If you'd like to ask a question, please do the traditional thing and send me a subtle, non-threatening signal, head nod, finger wave, what have you, and I'll happily call them one and all. We'll start off by offering our guests the opportunity to make some brief opening comments, and then we'll move to questions from around the table. And with that, Madam Ambassador, thanks for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I've looked forward to this meeting, and I think it's...
See how you feel when it's over.
Well, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But I thought this is a good opportunity, 7 months into my tenure here in Washington, to be able to meet with a cross-section of ladies and gentlemen from the media, and to be able to speak about the relationship between India and the United States, to speak about my country, India, to speak about the kind of work we do here. In fact, I've had the opportunity in these last 7 months to crisscross this country veritably, to speak to different audiences, particularly in various universities, to opinion makers across this country. And I've found a tremendous interest and curiosity and a spirit of inquiry about the nature of our relationship with the United States and what the issues concerning this relationship are today. India, as you know, is going through a process of profound transformation. The economy has grown at an accelerated rate in the last few years, and the emphasis of the government of India and the governments of the various states of the country has been to ensure inclusive growth that lifts people out of poverty. That emphasis on inclusive growth is very central to the Indian growth story today. And let me say that India and the United States, and the fact that the partnership has burgeoned, has blossomed, has evolved in the last few years, has enabled a great deal of economic engagement between the 2 countries that in many ways has a good impact on the Indian growth story. And also, if I may say, has enabled the advancement of the United States when it comes to your economy and your situation here. Why do I say that? Just looking at trade between the 2 countries, we have about $100 billion worth of trade as of last year in goods and services. And more importantly, you have U.S. businesses that do work in India that are engaged in very interesting research and innovation-centered activity in India, and I think they're doing profitable business in my country. Similarly, we have a large number of Indian businesses and Indian companies doing work here who are invested in almost 43 of the U.S. states today. And they have brought jobs and prosperity to this country, similarly, just as U.S. businesses have done in India. In fact, I have a study here that was brought out by the National Association of Software Manufacturers in India just a few days ago, which has done research and looked at analyzing the kind of work that Indian companies do here. And the conclusion drawn from this report, and I believe it's an objective report, it says that Indian software companies particularly have established about 100,000 jobs in this country directly. And indirectly, the numbers go up to 280,000. So that's the kind of integration that has taken place. Our companies working with local communities, very well adapted to the kind of environment here, and I believe doing good work. And this is very central to the partnership between the two countries. This is an engine of growth in the relationship. And the stakeholders that we have created as far as this partnership is concerned extend across almost every field of human endeavor. I was just looking at the statistics of Indian students who study in this country today, and we have numbers that amount to over 100,000. It's second only to the number of Chinese students who study here. And what we'd like to see is more and more American students also going to our universities. The State Department has announced the launch of a Passport to India initiative, which will allow American students, more and more of them, to be able to go to India for maybe a semester, maybe a study year, to understand the country better. And in fact, India, I believe, deserves that kind of in-depth study. A lot of US universities are now focused on creating and establishing India chairs, India studies programs. I was at Indiana University at Bloomington just yesterday, and they were speaking about their India studies program, which is extremely comprehensive. It's not just looking at philosophy and religion and divinity, but it's looking at economics and politics and agriculture and business management. Very, very comprehensive, and I believe that is how the future should develop in this relationship. At the political level, there is deep understanding. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and President Obama have a very profound friendship and deep level of understanding between them. Our Prime Minister came to Washington in November of 2009. It's the first state visit of the Obama administration. And President Obama went to India in November of 2010. And when he was there and when he spoke in our parliament, in fact, with the portrait of Mahatma Gandhi very clearly seen in that picture, he spoke about the defining nature of the partnership between India and the United States, and that this was a defining partnership for the 21st century. The strategic dialogue between our two countries has many pillars to it. It has security-related pillars. It has a counter-terrorism component to it. We have regional dialogues that cover East Asia, Central Asia, West Asia. We call it West Asia, you call it the Middle East. And we have partnerships that extend into areas like Afghanistan, where we're engaged in capacity building, in agriculture-related work, in women's empowerment. In some countries in Africa, similarly, India and the United States are working well together. And when it comes to the bilateral relationship, there is a very development-centered partnership with people at its core. We're talking of cooperation in health and agriculture and education, which I just mentioned, energy. We have now our scientists exchanging data in regard to the monsoon, for instance, which is so vital for Indian agriculture. We're talking of an evergreen revolution that in many ways becomes a second avatar, in a way, of the green revolution that we had in the 60s, and in which America played a very significant role in seeing the success of that in India.
They pay me big bucks to be rude, so I'm going to ask you if we can move to questions,
sure,
just so that my colleagues don't march on me with pitchforks and forks.
I didn't intend to.
No. Thank you for the overview. You were talking about the relationship of deep understanding and profound friendship. And yesterday, you told students at Indiana University this is an exciting time for U.S.-India relations. A different view comes from the wire service Agence France Presse, which wrote India and the United States are now navigating some of the rockiest waters since they began to build closer ties in the late 90s, with Washington weighing sanctions unless New Delhi significantly cuts oil imports from Iran. How would you describe the impact of the Iranian oil issue on relations with the United States?
Well, first of all, let me say that, the press reports apart, I'm not going to comment on that, but I'm here to tell you about the state of play in the relationship when it comes to Iran. And India and the United States have engaged in very constructive discussion. And I'm not indulging in diplomatic phraseology when it comes to this. We've had an open, frank, and candid discussion on issues concerning Iran. And I think there is understanding, there is a degree of understanding, and it's not a minuscule degree of understanding that I'm speaking of. In fact, I'm up at the State Department quite often to speak on this issue. The NSAs of the two countries have met and discussed this. Mike Froman from the National Security Council was with our Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas a few weeks ago in Delhi to discuss this issue. And the central message that India has conveyed in this regard is that, first of all, India is a responsible country, and we play by the international rules on these issues. You will not find, I don't believe, you will find an instance where India has been delinquent in any way when it comes to observing international sanctions whenever they've applied to countries. India, of course, is a net petroleum importer, you all know that, and West Asia is the major source of those imports. And in that energy mix, Iran has been a supplier. But Iran has been a supplier whose supplies to India of petroleum have gone down over the last few years. I have the statistics here. As of 2008-2009, the percentage of imports from Iran in India's total crude import was about 16.42%. As of 2011-2012, that percentage had come to 10.29%. So there's been a drop in that, as you will see, and that drop is even more perceptible now, because we all know that banking transactions with Iran have become virtually impossible. And practical reality demands that diversification is needed. And that is exactly what we're engaged in. But you must understand, and I think it's important that I speak frankly on this issue, that our energy security is vital for a country like India, with about 400 million people who still, are in need of sustenance and assistance from the government to access cheap sources of energy. It's very important. We have 500 million people in India that do not have electricity, for instance. You can understand the nature of the challenges that we face in this regard. So therefore, just overnight cutting off imports from Iran becomes virtually impossible. But I want to emphasize this, the share of Iranian imports in our total volume of petroleum import is going down as we speak, and there has been a significant reduction. I see that reduction being even more reinforced in the weeks and months to come. But let me also say that when it comes to Iran and its nuclear program, we have a very unambiguous and very clearly enunciated stand on the issue. Our voting in the International Atomic Energy Agency also speaks for this. Iran is a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has to abide by the obligations that it has taken on in this regard. We do not want to see a clandestinely emerged nuclear state in our region. It has repercussions for peace and security for all of us. And we want Iran to cooperate with the IAEA and the international community to answer the legitimate questions that have been raised about the nature of its nuclear program. Iran is also important, let me say, just add one more thing, in terms of the transit that we need to Afghanistan and Central Asia. Now, we have a very, as you know, a very crucial development assistance program for the Afghan people. We've committed about $2 billion worth of assistance, just in terms of human development, in terms of building infrastructure, roads, schools, hospitals in Afghanistan. And transit to Afghanistan, by virtue of the challenges that we face to enable transit to Afghanistan through Pakistan, has to be undertaken through Iran. So I wanted to mention that also.
Let me do one more, and then we'll move around the table. And that's sort of the issue of tension between the two countries, both over visas. The report in the New York Times this morning about an expanding criminal investigation of emphasis over the visa issue, and also the story this morning, as I know you're aware of, where a Bollywood actor was detained at White Plains Airport for 2 hours on his way to talk at Yale, and then told the press, or actually told the students, quote, whenever I start feeling too arrogant about myself, I always take a trip to America. The immigration guys kicked the star out of stardom. Can you talk about how you feel citizens of your country are treated by our government, and especially TSA?
Well, let me say, in regard to the incident involving Mr. Shah Rukh Khan, and he's one of our, as you know, our leading film stars in Bollywood, and he's an iconic figure, not just in India, but across the world. I'm sure many, many people, including, I'm sure, immigration and customs people in this country recognize him. I believe what happened was that his name figures in what you call the system. I mean, the word itself conjures up different images. But apparently that was the reason why he was detained for 75 minutes at White Plains, New York. He arrived by a private aircraft, and apparently, he got stuck at immigration, and he contacted the consulate, and the consulate spoke to the authorities, and that's how he was cleared. I think it was an unfortunate incident, and we wish it had not happened, and I think he deserved to be cleared immediately. As I would say, every Indian, I think, unless of course you have specific reasons that you have vis-a-vis a certain individual. But I'm sure in the case of Mr. Shah Rukh Khan, there was no such problem. So I hope it does not happen in the future. In fact, the customs... Is this
symptomatic in your view of how people...
No, I wouldn't say that. I think post 9/11, you've had heightened levels of checks, and you are super careful. I see the reasoning behind that, but I wish it hadn't happened in this case, because I don't believe Mr. Khan deserved to be detained at all, and he was here to address a student audience at Yale, and it was a prestigious event, and I wish it had happened smoothly. He is a star, and he remains a star despite what happened at White Plains. And as far as the other investigations into, I think you were talking about the Infosys stuff. Well, it's an ongoing investigation. The company, I know, is cooperating with it, and let us see what comes out of it. But I'd like to say in general that the information technology community, the young engineers and the young software developers, when I went to the World Trade Center after 9/11, soon after 9/11, in fact, within a month, they spoke about some Indian software engineers who were also trapped in the World Trade Center and who lost their lives. They have a stake in this relationship, and I think they've contributed in general. I'm talking of all the IT companies, have contributed a great deal to the enhancement of our relationship and our partnership. So I hope that these difficulties are sorted out, and that the relationship in terms of the trade and business component of it grows in strength in the future.
Colleagues? Could be a real short one this morning. Yes, go right ahead.
Ambassador, I wanted to ask you about a different subject entirely, and ask you about the sense of humanitarian responsibilities Indian fields or surrounding neighbors. Obviously, you've got, as you said, 400 million people in your own country, largely dependent on government assistance, and clearly India has serious concerns and problems. In Bangladesh, there are people who are really worried about climate change, global warming, causing sea rise that's going to flood their country. And they claim that you have a fence along the border, a fence along the border, and that it's intended not only to combat illegal immigration today, but to avoid or prevent large numbers of Bangladesh citizens from fleeing to India in the event of sea rise in the nation. What's the Indian view on that possibility and your responsibilities, if any, towards helping Bangladesh people?
First of all, let me say that we have a very, very special and deep friendship with the people of Bangladesh and with the government of Bangladesh, and there have been some excellent and very positive developments in that relationship since Sheikh Hasina came to power a few years ago. Our Prime Minister made a very successful visit to Bangladesh last fall, and that visit has generated extremely positive outcomes in terms of border management, in terms of development cooperation, in terms of trade and transit. You name it, I think it's been a very, very positive development in terms of India-Bangladesh relations. When it comes to people crossing the border, now, we have the northeast of India. We've had a great deal of flow of people, people also from Bangladesh and Nepal, for instance, who have, moved into this area, and that has certainly put pressures on the population mix and the demographics, let me say, of that region, which needs a great deal of development, which needs much more infrastructure, which needs better connectivity. So we're in discussion with the government of Bangladesh to ensure that we're able to put in place arrangements for better border management. But I don't believe, that the humanitarian dimension in the relationship has ever occupied a lesser place in terms of the construct of the relationship. Think of how when Bangladesh had its war of liberation, we had 10 million Bangladeshi refugees on Indian soil. India nurtured them, India took care of them. Of course, many of them went back after Bangladesh was liberated. So that human dimension has never escaped us, and we're very sensitive to it.
Fred?
Yeah, let me go back to the Iranian oil imports question. You say the imports from 16% to 10% over 3 years is pretty significant. Do you expect that pace to continue? And would you like to get the import level down to zero?
Well, if we're able to diversify and get, other sources of imports that could replace Iranian oil, that's not an eventuality that I would rule out, but it's going to take time. It's unrealistic to assume that, overnight, when there's, the sustenance of so many millions in question, that, the scenario dramatically alters. I'm being honest about it. I'm not trying to obfuscate. It's going to take a little time for us to reduce our imports. But please understand, all the major Indian companies, for instance, that were doing business in Iran, take Reliance, take Essar, take Larsen and Toubro, take Tata's, they've all scaled down their operations, and many of them have left Iran. They're not doing work there anymore. So that's the level of the, if you can call it, disengagement that is taking place. So.
And what's the reaction you get when you go to state to that?
I think they're very attentive and have been very receptive to what we've conveyed to them, and they are they've said we need to continue to discuss these issues, which of course India has always been prepared to do. We've never shied away from talking about what our situation is, what our concerns are, and what we can do. I think this has been a very open and transparent engagement, and I think it reflects the maturity of our relationship today. I mean, we're not hurling things at each other here. We're listening to what each side has to say. There is, I think, a level of sensitivity to each other's concerns on such issues that is a marker for this relationship today.
Seema,
Let me just follow up with one question. You gave the oil imports number. Is there a number that shows the drop off in trade and in the entire business relationship between India and Iran?
Well, let me first of all say that most of our trade with Iran consists of the imports that we make of oil. Most of it. We export very little to Iran, and so, from time to time you see reports of, there's been, recently there was this news about a big delegation going from India to Iran, and I'm bringing it up. I want to speak about this. We're not camouflaging anything here. Now, it was a trade delegation that consisted of exporters in what? In food grain, rice and wheat, pharmaceuticals. These are these are not items that are prohibited in terms of export to Iran. I know a lot of developed countries, in fact, sell food grain to Iran. I'm not going to indulge in naming them at this moment, but the fact is that trade goes on. And we have to pay for whatever oil we still import from Iran, because banking channels have become so difficult to operate. So some of it will need to be paid in rupees, but not all of it. So we will have to export something to pay for the oil that we import. And these are items that are not covered by sanctions. I want to emphasize that. So that's the way it is. I've just tried to answer you as honestly as I can.
We're going to go next to Seema and then to John Gizzi. Seema.
Former foreign secretary sort of looked at India's relations with the entire world. Just visited by the Pakistani president. It was a day-long visit, but it's raised hopes again that we may be able to make a breakthrough. Do you think this civilian government in Pakistan today has the wherewithal to actually deliver on it? The most important issue being prosecuting people who conducted terror attacks against India. And I think this issue is also relevant for the U.S.
Well, we are dealing with the civilian democratic government in Pakistan, and we will continue to deal with that government. I think, we have a reason to hope that this process of dialogue with Pakistan can be consolidated. And I think both countries have to work to achieve that. 2 years ago when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister Gilani met at the SAARC summit at Thimphu, they spoke about the need to reduce the trust deficit between the two countries. There's been a great deal of mistrust. There's been alienation. There's been so many distances that have separated our two countries. And Prime Minister Manmohan Singh always says, you cannot choose your neighbors. You have to deal with your neighbors, and you have to come to a modus vivendi with them. You have to be able to resolve outstanding issues, and you have to build a certain relationship of engagement between the two sides that enables confidence building, that enables the growth of trade and business ties, that enables people-to-people contact, that makes travel between the two countries easier. But all this, let me emphasize, it's essential that this happens in an atmosphere free of terrorism, and the threat of terrorism. That is important, and that is something we've sought to emphasize at every turn, on every occasion when we have spoken to the Pakistanis. I myself, as Foreign Secretary, was involved in this process of re-engagement after Mumbai. I visited Islamabad on a number of occasions and spoke to my counterpart, the Pakistan Foreign Secretary at that time. And so there is a great deal of work that remains to be done. And this is a difficult relationship. It has a history to it that has burdened both countries for more than 6 decades now. We want to look to the future. We want to see how we can establish a relationship that enables peace between our two countries, and it's essential for the whole region because, South Asia, the Indian subcontinent or South Asia, we have a great deal of work that remains to be done to deal with the problems that beset us, whether it's poverty or disease or ignorance, or we want to build a better future, and it has to start with dialogues of this nature.
We're going to go next to John, then to Emily, Amish, and Shashank. John?
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. When you said, quoted Prime Minister Singh saying you can't choose your neighbors, India has two neighbors who are very critical in developments in that part of the world, Burma and China now. And my question is twofold. First, regarding Burma, China recently was turned down with their offer of building a $3.8 billion dam, and the Thin government seems to want to turn to other parties, and many people, of course, tie this directly to the recent elections. Is this something India might participate in with a greater hand in a post-military Burma or Burma now? The other thing, I'm sure you and your government have followed the developments involving Ojilao in China, and is there a concern that this could lead to some very dramatic changes in Beijing, because it's been called the most dramatic political upheaval since 1971?
I lived in China for 3 years, almost 3 years. I was ambassador to China at one stage, just before I became Foreign Secretary. But I'll come to that in a little while. You raised the issue of Burma. We call it Myanmar. And it is the only Southeast Asian country, a member of ASEAN, that borders India. Actually, we have contiguous borders between India and Myanmar. And let me say a little, before I come to Myanmar, about Northeast India. Northeast India borders Myanmar. And I always say that Northeast India is where Southeast Asia begins. So, there's often, this view that India is a South Asian country. There's no doubt about it. India is a South Asian country. But in my estimation, it's a multi-regional country. It has a perspective that leads it into Southeast Asia. It has ethnic, linguistic, geographic, historic connections with our Southeast Asia. So coming to Myanmar, we have engaged with the government of Myanmar for some years now. We have done a lot of development-related work in Myanmar, capacity building. We have a number of Myanmari students who study in India. In fact, perhaps it's not very well known in this country, but Aung San Suu Kyi spent her youth in India. She went to college in Delhi. Her mother, late mother, was the then Burmese ambassador to India. And she spent her formative years going to college in Delhi, and she has a lot of sentimental attachment to India as a result. And subsequently, when she went to university in England, she specialized in Himalayan studies. So she did a lot of work in Northeast India, the very part I'm referring to. So, there is this connection with the democratic movement in Burma, Myanmar, that India has had for many, many decades. But Myanmar is vital to us from the point of view of our security, from the point of view of the economic development of the Northeast. So we have sought to build connectivity through Myanmar to our Northeast. We have engaged with the government there in order to build capacity for people. We do a lot of small development projects at the grassroots level in Myanmar. So we've engaged with the people of that country, and I have visited that country on many occasions, and gone to many parts of that country and understood the vitality of its people, and we are very, very pleased and happy about recent developments in that country. So to answer your question whether India replaces China, I think one wouldn't look at it in such stark terms, because it's really up to the Burmese Myanmarese government to decide the direction in which they proceed on such issues. But certainly I think there is heightened awareness of the need to protect the environment. There is a lot of, there are a lot of views being expressed at the grassroots level, at the level of the people, at the level of a burgeoning civil society in Myanmar about how development should be undertaken and the need to preserve a very precious and fragile environment. And I think that is something we understand completely. Now, when it comes to China and the developments there, I think, there's certainly it's been interesting, I would say, to put it very mildly, to see the manner in which developments have taken place within China. It's not just the economic transformation that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of events surrounding leadership change in China. This is a crucial year from that point of view. I don't want to comment specifically on the events surrounding Ho Xilai and what happened in Chongqing and what the makeup of the Politburo is going to be as a result of this and who will be in the standing committee. That's really not for me to comment, but we will be looking at it very carefully. Let me say that India is an immediate neighbor of China, just as we are of Myanmar, and this is a crucial relationship, and it's a complex relationship. There are many areas where we have issues that remain to be resolved. One of them of significant nature is the boundary question between the two countries that is yet to be resolved, but on which we are talking to each other in order to see whether we can achieve a negotiated settlement. I think one point to keep in mind is that peace and tranquility has prevailed on our borders with China for over almost 4 decades now, and we intend that it should be kept that way. And there are many confidence-building, tension reduction mechanisms in place to obviate situations where tensions may escalate. So we've built a certain structure in our relations with China that has enabled dialogue, that has enabled tension reduction, that has seen trade go up to $72 billion as of last year. In fact, China has become our largest trading partner in goods, not in goods and services, where the U.S. is greater in terms of the quantities involved. So the levels of engagement with China have become increasingly evolved and multifaceted, and which is a good thing, I think, in terms of these two large Asian countries, these two emerging giants, if I may say so, engaging in a peaceful manner with each other.
Emily?
Madam Ambassador, I wanted to talk to you about India's role in the United Nations. I know that your country has expressed the long-standing interest in joining the Security Council. There was also, in the past cycle, when they were on the Security Council, some crucial votes that I don't think endeared India or some of the other aspirants to the Security Council. One that was on Syria, and I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about the rationale for India's votes on Syria and sort of how you view the Security Council, what your expectations are going forward for when we might see some change in the makeup.
Well, it's difficult to predict when that change might happen, but we all are in an anticipatory mode, let me say, because we would certainly like to see an expansion of the Security Council, both in its permanent and non-permanent categories. And I think that is the general, expression of intent and will that is coming from the floor of the General Assembly today. I mean, I'm just not talking of a few countries here, but I'm talking of the majority of opinion within the United Nations on the need for expansion. But this is a process that is obviously will need, the vast majority to be on board, particularly and looking at the present membership of the Security Council, we would have to see how this whole campaign gathers strength. But we have, India's case has received support, India's candidature has received support from a number of our friends and partners, including in the Security Council, and especially from the United States when President Obama went to India. And we are very, very appreciative of that, and we value that. So, having said that, now India is currently a non-permanent member of the Security Council until the end of this year, the beginning of next year. And I think on Syria, we have expressed ourselves with a great deal of frankness. We want the situation in Syria to be resolved peacefully. We want the voice of the people of Syria to be heard. We do not want violence to be perpetrated by the regime against the population. All that we've said. Obviously, the international community has to stay engaged. At the last vote on Syria, in fact, we voted with the other countries, including the United States, in support of the need for an end to violence and the immediate. This was a call for restoration of peace within that country, and for the regime and the opposition to talk about the differences that separate them. And that is what, in fact, the Kofi Annan peace mission is engaged in now. We support that mission wholeheartedly. We would like to see it succeed. So that is where we stand on this issue. Change in the Arab world, we've seen this upheaval all across the Arab world in the last year. That change has to come from within. We would like to see more democracy. We would like to see the will of the people expressed, and for the government's concern, the regime's concern, to be sensitive to the needs of the people and for violence to end.
Amish.
Thank you. Master, taking you back to Iran, recently the U.S. administration has exempted some countries from sanctions for cutting down their imports of Iranian crude. Other countries like India...
You speak up just a little.
Yeah, other countries like India have a late June deadline to meet this. You said you don't know how long it will take to cut down India's imports. Can India meet this late June deadline?
You're talking of a significant reduction by June.
Yes.
As I said, we're in close contact with the United States about the current situation, and the information is being shared, and I'd like to leave it at that. I think you should believe me when I'm saying this.
What are the challenges that India faces? Refineries need to be calibrated.
We have at least 5 of our refineries that are geared to processing Iranian, what they call sweet light crude from Iran. And so that process of retooling and re-engineering to meet processing needs of crude from other sources will obviously have to be completed. But, without going into the technical details about this, I want to tell you that, we are alert to all these needs at the moment. And this is it. And we take the situation seriously. We are not dismissive of the constraints and the developing nature of this situation. We pay very close attention to it, and we are responding to the situation that we see.
Roshank.
Madam Ambassador, last year, of course, India signed a strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan. There has been talk that, given the political realities both in the U.S. and in Afghanistan, that the U.S. will try to somewhat accelerate the pace with which it transitions security to Afghan forces, perhaps as early as next year. Can you talk a bit about what you see as the landscape in Afghanistan over the next 18 to, say, 24 months before the end of 2014? How can India implement the terms of this long-term agreement we have with Afghanistan, given the upheaval that's likely to happen there as the U.S. tries to make this transition in the next year to 2 years?
I think, first of all, India intends to invest and endure when it comes to Afghanistan. because it's a vital country for us. It is a neighboring country. It's a country with which we've had very close ties. They were not just built here and now. They've endured through decades, even centuries. Now, it's essential that the international community, and particularly the regional countries around Afghanistan, stay invested in Afghanistan to ensure peace and stability and democracy in that country. And that is the way India looks at it. That is the perspective. I spoke about the investments we've made in terms of development aid and assistance in Afghanistan. The strategic partnership agreement that you referred to, which really consolidates and seeks to implement further the kind of engagement that we have had to help the Afghan people. Of course, when it comes to security needs of Afghanistan, whatever Afghanistan needs from India, this is a sovereign decision of the government of Afghanistan I'm referring to now. What it needs, we will do our best to help, given our own capacities and given our own, strengths and capabilities. So that's where it is. We would obviously not like to see a regression or a reversion in Afghanistan to the situation that existed before 2001, because that would mean a collapse of whatever has been achieved in the last decade, and a little more than a decade, particularly when it comes to women and children, when it comes to the education of children, when it comes to all the infrastructure needs of Afghanistan. It's a resource-rich country. It's meant to be a hub for trade and transit between Central Asia, West Asia, and South Asia. That's where the true talents of the Afghan people lie. They are born entrepreneurs and traders and businessmen. And if, we could, when you talk of people seem to think that democracy and modernization are all recent imports into Afghanistan. I mean, I'm looking back at 70, 80 years. Afghanistan was very much looking to integration with the rest of the world up until the 70s when, things went so horribly wrong in that country. So this mix is, as I think King Zahir Shah used to say, this mix of dunya and deen. Dunya meaning the material world and deen meaning faith. You need that mix for Afghanistan. And that's what we would like to see. It's an ethnically diverse country, and you need closer, understanding and integration between these various groups so that they can all live together in peace. And I think the region has to play a very important part. The role of countries like Pakistan, for instance.
Go ahead.
If I could quickly follow up, do you think that accelerating the transition to Afghan security control would jeopardize some of those gains you're talking about in terms of women in school, children in school, this kind of thing?
Obviously, abandonment is not a word that any of Afghanistan's friends would like to see used in this context. And I don't believe that is the approach of the United States government. I think they intend to stay invested in Afghanistan when it comes to the welfare of its people and its development. And that is why I referred to the kind of work that India and the United States are doing and hope to do further in helping the Afghan people. So I think it's important that the international community stays engaged to ensure that, as I said, Afghanistan stays on a development path, and also to ensure that the forces of extremism, terrorism, radicalism do not set the agenda for Afghanistan.
Anybody who hasn't had one? Sure.
And as a woman who comes from a country that has put women in topmost political roles, can you, and obviously a student of politics, what's the difference between our country and yours? Why haven't we had a vice president or president? Do you have any idea? And do you have any maybe advice for people who are frustrated here by that?
I don't want to be prescriptive. But what I'd like to say is that, you've had many gains when it comes to the position of women in your country here in the United States. And I think you have to look at the whole picture when it comes to these such situations. Back in India, yes, we've had a woman prime minister. We've had women in top leadership positions. We have a woman president today, our first woman president. But, you know, there are many issues concerning women in India on which we would like to see more progress made. As I said, it's a very diverse country. And in some states of India, the state I come from, for instance, I come from the state of Kerala in the deep south of India, and it's quite the poster child for human development. We have almost 100% literacy, including for women in my state. But there are other states in India where we have to make more progress, where, you know, government is very focused on what we need to do for maternal and child health in order to raise women's literacy levels, in order to raise the level of participation of women in government, in administration. So there's a lot of work that is being done, that remains to be done. So I think there is a mix of different situations in each country. I think the most important thing for women in any democracy or in any country of the world is freedom from fear. And I think that is the fundamental freedom as I see it for a woman. And that is what we must seek to consolidate in every country of the world.
Do you see someday that the United States will have a woman president?
I definitely see the possibility of that. I mean, why not?
When you say freedom from fear, can you be more...
Freedom from violence, from, let's say, domestic violence or intimidation or social mores and you know, obstacles that prevent women from expressing their voice, from being independent, from being financially independent, from being able to take decisions that affect the lives of their families, and you know, and to be able to contribute to the community, to be able to communicate better with the world outside, beyond the confines of their households.
You bet.
Would you like to make any comment, Ambassador, on the...
You speak up, Indira.
Sure, I'm sorry. Would you like to make any comment on the WTO case that India has filed with regard to the visas and the doubling in the charge for the visas? And I know there are negotiations going on to try to head that off.
We checked the position on that. That case has not yet been filed.
It hasn't yet.
It hasn't yet been filed. Of course, we have concerns about, you know, the difficulties that some of our professionals have faced when it comes to the grant of visas, particularly L1 visas, when they want to travel here to the United States. And we have taken this up with both with the State Department and with the Department of Homeland Security. In fact, Deputy Secretary Jane Lute is traveling to India next week. She's going to be there. Of course, we have a very strong counter-terrorism initiative, as you know, with the United States. So the focus will obviously be on that, but such issues could also come up for discussion.
Ashish, real quickly, and then we'll be done.
Thank you. Ambassador, can you talk a bit about India's role in Sudan and South Sudan and your thoughts on developments between the two countries right now?
Well, we're involved very much, again, when it comes to our energy security in Sudan. We'd like to see peace between the two sides. We'd like to see, more evidence of reconciliation. And we intend to stay engaged.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So I shouldn't have been amazed, but I have a son who's in the Navy, and I told him I was having breakfast with you tomorrow, and he was mentioning that you've just leased a Russian nuclear sub.
That's right. Yes,
and what you're thinking of the second one.
We're building a nuclear submarine.
But I read this morning that you're thinking that you've already leased one, and there's talk of doing a second as well.
I have not privy to the details of it, but certainly I think the Navy and India's naval outreach, I think, is important for a country of India's.
Yes.
The preoccupations that we have with security.
And I didn't realize that such things could be leased. I just found it fascinating.
Yes. It's more in terms of enabling greater operability. These are not submarines that will have nuclear weapons on board. This is more in terms of nuclear-powered submarines.
Right, so you don't have to worry about the amount of time they can be out at sea.
That's right.
Thank you so much for doing this.